We got a very interesting indie game that's playing here behind us, and I thought I'd catch up with you and ask you a little bit about it. Mayan Death Robots. I mean, it's a pretty awesome title. Just that. Can you tell us a little bit what kind of game is this?
Well, when we were thinking about doing our next project, we really wanted to do a game like Worms or Scorched Earth. But one thing that always kind of annoyed me about these games is that you always have to wait for the other guy. And sometimes in Worms it can take a pretty long time and can get a bit boring. So we were thinking, okay, so what about a game where you have to take your turns at the same time? You shoot, you choose your weapon, you shoot, and immediately you have to choose another weapon, and everyone does it at the same time. This kind of allows for interesting interactions that aren't really possible in like Worms, where you like shoot a grenade and then like the other guy jumps in the way of the grenade and the grenade bounces back, and all this stuff happens, and in the meantime you're already choosing your next weapon. So it's a lot more fast-paced, and that's what like was the origin of the idea behind Mayan Death Robots.
It's a really, there's a lot of clever little ideas that you brought into this game. The setting is that it is two robots that are basically fighting it out, but there's also Mayans coming into it. You got to protect your power cord. You got to build your base to try and protect it. There's just so many layers of gameplay here. Can you walk us through what's going on?
Well, basically, so the story of the game is that there's two alien robots, and they are landing in the Mayan jungle 1,000 years ago, and they're kind of unaware that humans exist at all. They're just here because they're filming a television show about celebrity deathmatch, and they start fighting each other, and then there's like these little tiny mammals walking around, and they think that their gods have descended from the heavens because the robots are really huge, and they land in these big UFOs. So they start worshipping the robots, and they split up in kind of two tribes, one worshipping the left robot, one worshipping the right robot, and they each try to defend the robot they are worshipping. And from this, like, all these little things happen during the game. For example, if you decide to move to the other side of the map to get like a cheap close shot, just like move to the other core and shoot it straight up in the face, the Mayans will say, no, that's not going to happen, and they will start throwing pineapples and like try to push the other robot off the cliff, try to help you out. And I think basically when we were thinking about this game, we were thinking, okay, so we've got huge robots, this is a cool idea, but we're not going to put it in a city because that's kind of a cliche and it's been done so many times before. We don't want to make a Godzilla game. So we were thinking about different settings for it, and then we were thinking, okay, so what about a jungle? Like, that's something different, like a Mexican jungle or a Caribbean island or something. And then when we were thinking about the jungle, we were like, okay, but let's put it in a historic setting as well, not like modern Mexicans, but the Mayas from 1,000 years ago. Like, they're walking around and they're really like, holy shit, what is happening here? And then the idea is that if we decipher today's Mayan writings, when they're talking about gods, they were actually talking about the robots, and they were actually there. We just don't know it because they left and cleaned up after themselves.
That's a very clever idea. And there's this nice progression also in the campaign where the Mayans sort of evolve and they learn more skills, and eventually the Spaniards arrive as well.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens is we designed something called campaign mode, which is not a single player version of the game, but it's a multiplayer version. So you just, when you buy the game, you sit down with a friend and you start playing together. And at first the Mayas are kind of distant, and they discover the robots and they're like, okay, our gods have arrived. They start building totems for them and start worshipping them. And eventually they learn from the robots and start copying their technology. Like they discover the wheel through the robots because the robots have like tire tracks and all this kind of stuff. And then they start building catapults and start getting in on the action because they want to help their god out. And then the Mayas start becoming a threat to the other player, and you have to like take care and not only shoot the robot and his core, but also prevent the Mayas from helping him out. And then eventually, like, you pass through Mayan history as you play more and more with your friend, and they start doing more and more stuff. And suddenly the Spanish appear. Like they start invading the country, and they become a common enemy. You see ships floating in, like they start bombarding everything, and then they disembark and start like shooting the robot and shooting his core. You have to work together with your Mayan tribe to destroy the Spanish invasion. And so the idea is that every time you boot a game and you go to campaign mode and you play with your friend, something new happens, right? Something like the game takes another turn, and like something unexpected happens, and there's boss fights, and there's climate change, and all of that stuff just happens as you play. As you can see right now, sometimes there's a snowy landscape because the robots kind of like to mess with the climate of the world. They like send in probes and like try to manipulate the world and like to make it better for their television show. And in the meantime, the Mayas are just like dealing with the shit. So that's kind of, as you play, more and more stuff starts happening, and the game becomes more complex. Because initially you're just like shooting each other, and that's it. And then the Mayas get involved, you have to take them into account, and then the Spanish come and you have a common enemy that you have to fight as well. And there's also the Mayan gods. So that's an entirely different thing that's also happening. So I told you that the Mayas think that the robots are gods and they're worshipping them. But the real Mayan gods also exist. And they're pretty pissed off that the Mayas stopped worshipping them and are worshipping the robots. So sometimes when you're playing, suddenly a Mayan god will appear and it will become a boss battle. And these guys are really big. They're like fill the screen, and the game becomes a co-op game. You have to fight the mega boss together, until you kill the boss, you can't fight each other. Just after you destroy the boss, then you can start blasting each other again, and the game like turns back to normal. So we're adding all these little things that mix the game up and keep it fresh throughout like your playtime.
I also think there's a really nice little, I mean, it's not just about shooting, it's very tactical as well, because there's this mechanic where if you die as a robot, you sort of the number of building blocks that you have to rebuild your base between rounds gets reset to 0 again. So you have to sort of try and stay alive, and you have to sort of weigh your options. Like, do you shoot to try and get the core, or do you kill the robot so that he can't rebuild his base so much? There's a very nice balance to the tactics there.
Yeah, that's true. One of the things we discovered really early game was like all of these games like Worms don't really have a way to increase your defenses. It's just purely destruction. And we wanted to add some layer of tactical on top of that by allowing the player to rebuild defenses by placing Tetris blocks. So the longer you're alive, the more Tetris blocks you accumulate. And when you choose the build option instead of attacking, you can like place Tetris blocks in the level and rebuild the ground that the other guy destroyed. And it's really tactical about where you place your blocks and how you rotate them and how long you wait before placing them, because the longer you wait, the more blocks you can place in one turn. So it's all a lot of trade-off that's going on there. It's every turn you get a really easy choice. You have only 4 options, like one of the 2 weapons, or move your robot, or build. But every turn you're making an important choice, and every turn you're like weighing, should I build now, or can I wait one more turn? Can I get away with this? Like, okay, I'll shoot. You shoot, the other guy kills you. Game over. Maybe you should have built instead. So that's the kind of like trade-offs you have to make all the time. And there's not a lot of choices, but you have to make them continually, which makes the game quite challenging actually.
So where are you at in game development at the moment? Where are you at with the game?
Well, right now we're pretty far in beta. The game is quite polished. All the game mechanics are in place. It's like we're quite happy with how it plays right now. But there's a lot of content missing. We still have to port the game to consoles. We're releasing on Steam and on next-gen consoles. We have to add online multiplayer, which will be in there as well. And we just have a lot of content to add. Like I told you, the campaign mode will be quite a long affair with some sub-storylines emerging. And right now we have about 14 like events, but we're going up to 40 or 50. So that's basically, we're planning for an August release, and it's just like adding more stuff to the game right now.
Best of luck with that. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much.